Assalamu alaikum, ladies and gentlemen. Welcome to CXO Global Forum's Health Tech Show, Health is Wealth.
Recording in progress.
Health is Wealth is a health tech program that is brought to you by Active Key Solutions, a insurtech healthcare play started by Pakistani Americans operating in Pakistan. We have with us today a very distinguished guest who not only is a leading and enterprising healthcare consultant in Pakistan, but also serves on the Digital Health Association. Mr. Fahd, welcome to the show. How do you do?
Thank you very much. Thank you, Bilal, for having me. And thank you for your kind words.
Likewise. So we see a very dynamic and a quick growing healthcare market in Pakistan in play. If one looks at the medical equipment market in Pakistan, it is estimated between 400 to 500 million US dollars, whereas the pharmaceutical market is estimated around 4 billion US dollars. Now, COVID, you could say, has stagnated things quite a bit and things are picking up. And a lot of times what people have realized that healthcare itself as an industry is a tough nut to crack. There's high barriers to entry. There's lots of costs involved. And especially in the realm of health tech, this coming from a health tech entrepreneur in me, having run an e-pharmacy setup that is now merged and become a full-on telemedicine, telehealth platform, that there is still that issue of whether it might be receptive or not among the population of Pakistan, given the fact that people are starting to use the internet more, but still prefer using the traditional channels for healthcare as opposed to going online for them. So likewise, it begs me to ask a question about what your professional background has been and how you managed to get into the field of medicine as a whole.
So thank you, Bilal, for having me. I'm Fahd Kakakhel, and I'm a health tech consultant. I'm a graduate from the US in finance and IT. And then I've worked for multiple multinational companies like Nokia, Citibank, Nokia Siemens. And I worked for these corporate companies, multinational companies in the compliance, operations, business development, procurement, supply chain. And I worked with them for 10 years. While I was all at this, I got married and I had a daughter in 2012 on the 24th of April. I spent 3 days at the hospital and looking at things. I figured out that I should now use my multinational company's experience and my degree in finance and IT to practically use to make a difference in healthcare. And that's the time when I started. It has been a decade now. I started off with setting up a 50-bedded hospital, and we worked on the brick and mortar model where I set up multiple hospitals where I was doing the clinical schematic, equipment, furniture planning. But while I was doing that and while I was heading the hospital and making other hospitals through my company, which is Park Health Consultants, Corona came in. And when Corona came in 2020, the brick and mortar kind of stagnated and I tried to diversify towards tech. And health tech is really needed because brick and mortar is finished. You need to go to your patient. Your patient is your client and you have to. So then the e-pharmacy started, everything, home care started, and everybody was going to the patient. And obviously going to the patient and patient-centric approaches will always be a success. And now that insurance is coming in, where they don't want to go to intervention because intervention becomes very expensive for the insurance, they want to go a lot in preventive care. So if you digitize the data, where you have the data turned into information, which becomes a program, which could be for stenting or which could be for malnutrition or anything, you go into prophylactic care. So for digitization, this the commercial aspect is what everybody is doing. But the preventive part, where you can actually design the program, where you can tap into impact-related funds, where you come up with these programs, because there are a lot of countries ahead of us and they want people to have the basic needs that they require. So when you tap into that and you come up with that, for me, that's what I want to address. And for me, the true happiness comes from when Allah puts me in a position to help somebody.
That's essentially why I think every single person should be in healthcare. It's because of that one driving force to help your fellow human being out. I think, in terms of motivation, profits or monetary benefits should come second.
Yeah, the money comes as a byproduct. money comes as a byproduct. So if you start chasing the money, then it becomes very commercial, and then you become unethical, and then then your mission is different then.
Yeah. And that leads me on to my next question about what exactly your company, Kakakhel Consultants, actually does. What's its core competency? What's its greater vision? And what would you say is its unique value proposition?
So for Park Health Consultants, people who are aligned with this mission and vision that we have, we get them from across the globe. We put them together. We have a board of directors. We have a C-level management team. We have our administration and our project management team. We put these people together. We work on different projects together. And we have interestingly gotten a lot of international clients that we're bringing into Pakistan, because we basically help them navigate through the health tech landscape in Pakistan, where we help them coming in to invest in Pakistan. We have 250 million people with 113 million tele density with 22, 23 years average age. So it becomes a market by itself.
Very elaborately said. And, with that, I'm sure the way you've explained your company, it shouldn't be a surprise that people have been drawn towards your vision and mission and have wanted to avail your services for bettering their processes. And with that, I have to ask what some of your biggest success stories operating in Pakistan have been to date.
My biggest success, that's a tough question. So I would say my biggest would be the setting up the Digital Health Association for Pakistan in the Corona time. And we were lucky enough to put those people together, where we got the first the digital health framework by working with the government, with the health ministries together to get at least the first framework out to figure out where we're going to start from. So that I would say my achievement. The second achievement I would say is I work closely with the academia. So I want the industry problems to be reflected in the curriculum of the academia. So when they come out, and they don't come out as dud, where they're not connected with the industry at all. So when I went to college, we used to have a co-op program. So you would do a degree, and then 6 months you would practice it. So the same I would really push. So I work with multiple universities, and I'm part of their panel, where these academia students come out, and I want to do this linkage because I work closely to set up these health incubations as well. So I want these students to come into that incubation program, where then these consultants and group we bring in the money and we solve that problem. So that's another thing I've really worked on. And then my other achievement is getting these international clients to know that we have this landscape where we can help them navigate, and they could get that professional work done. So they actually know the insights of the dynamics of the market. So I'm working with a lot of international clients who are very interested in coming in, and we signed off with them, and they want to come in and put the money in.
Well, that's a quite an impressive repertoire, I must say. Now, in terms of health tech, one has to examine how technology is fared in Pakistan. And it's one thing to state that there is a very high rate of internet penetration in the country. People are using smartphones, but at the same time, what really is the public sector doing to make healthcare more accessible in Pakistan? And this doesn't apply to healthcare. Myself am involved in a few sports initiatives, and sometimes what you find is you get a lot of support from the private sector. It doesn't necessarily need to be in the deployment of tech. It can also be in giving much needed funds and giving support in doing some sort of training to improve the livelihood of a particular community, and for that to yield results down the road. That's why I think people talk about our sustainable development goals so much, and I think you're quite heavily focused, and so everyone in healthcare naturally, to focus on the third goal of the UNDP, the Sustainable Development Goals, which focuses on health and well-being. So, there's been a lot of talk that people should develop, say, a centralized database for patients that can be used nationwide. There's been lots of talks of developing Internet of Things medical devices that store the data of your health, in a centralized database as well, like a glucometer, for example, or a pacemaker. The question that now I'm going to ask you is, how do you think we can use tech to improve the overall state of healthcare in Pakistan?
So see, our setups, if you go into the public sector, they love making buildings, they love getting the equipment, they love hiring people, but there's no operations. The tech would start that operation if somebody wants to get it done. So a lot of these hospitals are now going into public-private partnership. And with insurance, interestingly, wherever there's service, there's going to be money. So if you're not giving service, it doesn't make a difference if it's public or private. Whoever's giving that service will be getting that money. With the tech part actually is where you can have a remote system where the doctor doesn't need to be there. So you have the basic, your paraphernalia there, your technicians there, and to handle them is not much of a problem. But then you have a control unit which is actually then doing your consultation, your detail. And if it's digital and it's date stamped and time stamped, there's not much you can do. But the interesting part is now that since in KBK we 40 million people, the insurance company is going to make sure that it happens. Because if you're doing your previous practice and there's intervention, it costs a lot to the insurance for the intervention. So they are going to make sure that they give the money to the place where they're going to cut. So they're going to come up with this tech. They're going to start working on these things because they eventually want to save money, right? So they're going to be they're going to become a driving force into it.
Yes, absolutely. And in fact, you're talking about insurance. It's very, very pertinent to also, educate others and how there's a long way to go for insurance and insurtech solutions in Pakistan. So, though the sponsor of the show is actually an IT services support company, the founders are also involved in a healthcare insurtech platform based in the States. So they developed an insurtech platform that did distribution of specialty pharmacy medicines. And then they exit from that and are now focusing on simply the insurtech. And that really makes not just the physician or the healthcare system in place, but the customer and the patient's life much easier. Where they go see a doctor, their consultation is more or less paid for. The doctor even, gives them multiple options on how they can receive the medicine. So he's not necessarily incentivized to push an online mechanism just for the sake of the fact that it naturally would give them that data. But even like say your traditional brick and mortar pharmacies like Walgreens have spent so much money, upwards of $400 million on developing an intercom that allows a Florida-based patient to go to California and use prescription over there to buy generic. So when you see that, right, having said that, there's a lot of players in the market, and there, when you even talk about something like Naya Jeevan, for example, this is something I've been hearing back in 2011 and 2012 when I was still studying in college. I came back to Pakistan in 2014, and then I saw that product come about in Pakistan, even though I had doubts about how well it would fare. And you definitely, because you've been involved in the health tech consultancy space, you've seen probably way more of these ventures pop up. So my natural next question to you is how you see the private healthcare space developing over the next few years in Pakistan. Are we, we can definitely not really compare ourselves to the Western world, but how would you compare yourselves to say India in this case? I think that would be an interesting.
If I look at it in Pakistan and the private, I think with insurance, there would be no private and public. Whoever is giving service would excel. So primarily that. So the problem that we had in Pakistan was at government level, you won't get anything. The private was like 10 steps up, only just a few percentage of people were getting it. The people in between, then they would go to shrines and they would go manate and they would do things like that because everybody needs closure, right? So I would say so for private sector, and if they want to cater to the quantum of people, they have to really slash down on their rates and they have to really optimize their processes. And they really, because it's not like you could just come up with a new rate list every time and you're not even regulated. So for that, when you are working with insurance, you would have to really make your systems efficient so that you can meet that criteria where you get a guideline from them and you have to stick around with it. So it's basically, I won't differentiate between the two. It'll be whoever gives service would be running the show. And that's how it should be.
That makes sense, right? Because the end goal shouldn't really depend on whether it's coming from the private sector or the public sector. It's to improve.
It should be a service, right?
Yeah, I mean, it should be, right? I mean, and like I said, we live in a country where the private sector has had to step up because the public sector maybe fell short a few times in certain industries, not just in healthcare.
Yeah, agree. So that happens every time when your public sector is not. That's the same in education as well. But then the public sector should come as a regulator where they can set up the framework so it's fair play to everybody. So then they set back and they say, okay, we do the framework now, and then everybody follows it. Whoever wants to come and come, but this is the rule of the game.
Yeah, it makes a lot of sense. And I guess there is one final question that I'd like to ask. The focus of this program has been health tech. You yourself are a health tech consultant, and I have been a health tech entrepreneur. And the question is, what role digital health startups will play in Pakistan going forward? And before you actually answer that, a lot of people come up with these theories about how the digital health ecosystem will come into play 15 years from now or even 10 years from now. And these are conversations that weren't just natural to have between myself and say my own family members or people in my own company, but with other aspiring entrepreneurs as well, where we saw basically, like say, for example, the e-pharmacy space was that we saw a shift of life-saving drugs or expensive drugs coming or being incentivized to be bought through online channels because of its traceability, whereas the brick and mortar space would still be quite heavily there and would be pushed towards your consumer and OTC products. And that's just me, talking about maybe 10 or 20% of the conversations I had. There's a lot people can talk about. And so with you, because you've explored different aspects of healthcare, what do you see digital health startups doing in Pakistan going forward?
I would say that where we have this program between the industry and academia linkage, and you get the academia students out, and you have health tech incubation, where you solve the problem to make the system efficient, and you're helping with the insurance, where you have somebody to sell it to, it will always be a success. It can't go wrong. So if that startup is aligned with that and their optimization coming into the system where you are underwriting it to the insurance company, where you're giving them the projection of saving that money, you're a hit to begin with. And then the number of transactions, we're the fifth most populous country. We're working in cardiac care. Rawalpindi Institute of Cardiology gets 3,000 patients a day. So, but the problem is we are all holding on to our data and everybody thinks independently their data is the thing, but we need to put it together so that together it has strength, and then that's when it becomes an API. Because you're holding on to your data, I'm holding on to mine, but none of us is working to put it together to make it into information. And you can make so many programs out of that. Any program that you align with that data that you have, and you make information, any program that you make with it, and you're incubated out of you're incubated out of incubation center, and you plug it in, it will work.
Very well said. And this has been quite an insightful episode. I'd like to end touching upon one of the points that you made, that I actually attended probably and possibly the first ever genetics conference that was held in Pakistan at the Health Services Academy in Islamabad. And the head of the Special Technology Zones Authority at the time, Amra Hashmi, had come in, and he said something, very pertinent, that where we distinguish ourselves from other economies that have essentially done so well is that we ourselves, at where we stand right now, are not a knowledge economy. So it is obviously quite pertinent, and it's important that players like us, not just from the industry, but from academia, from technology, from the government, acknowledge that we need to make data-driven decisions. But at the same time, the economy that we've been running is not an economy where knowledge is shared to that certain extent. And that's why you see developments happening in China, which may not have been a knowledge economy possibly 30 or 40 years ago, but has developed into one. So I just wanted, G?
I totally agreed. We don't share information because we think that what's sitting on that information, if I give it away to somebody, that person is going to take it away. What am I going to do? So basically, if you give it away and you get something new to learn, but we just hold on to it, we don't give it away. But when you give it away, Allah Ta'ala gives you more wisdom and He puts you on to the next step.
Yes, it would be great if everyone thought like that. Thank you so much, Mr. Fahd, for attending the show.
Thank you so much, Bilal, for having me. I hope I made sense. I'm too entrenched in my working and all. I don't know if your audience would enjoy what I was saying.
Well, I think they understand where you're coming from, of course, given your background and you know how passionate you've been about your projects. So
yeah,
have a good weekend.
Thank you. You too. Thank you for having me.
All right. Goodbye.
Recording